As the hitting intensifies, it's 1-0 Montreal. On a power play for another 50 seconds. Richards trying to scoot in there alone. Halak way out of the net. It pinballs to the crease. Score! Mike Richards!
The Flyer captain is announcing his presence as the alpha male early in this one. Big hit. Sets up that cranker from Coburn, the defenseman joining the attack. They win a puck deep in their own zone. Hammerlick and the goaltender Halak collide. Oh, did they ever. And it's a tap in for Richards.
TheFourthPeriod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 83. It's time for an NHL playoff preview, and the Flyers are going to be facing the Montreal Canadiens, who upset the Pittsburgh Penguins. That's right, the round robin's over, the qualifiers are over. It's time for real playoff hockey. The round of 16 is going to begin tomorrow. The Flyers start on Wednesday. I'm your host, Isaiah. I'm here with my partners, Chef B.
How you doing?
And the great Dan Silver.
Number one seed, baby.
That's right. We got to talk about all this. Tonight's about as much of a jam-packed show as we're going to be able to give to you. Make sure you check out what is technically episode number 82 with the TFP correspondent Anthony DeMarco. Of course, he's located in Quebec, and he's the Flyers and Canadiens reporter for thefourthperiod.com. And he talks about what the Canadiens are and gives us a little mini preview. And you can check that out. It's called an O&B special sneak preview. So make sure you check that out. Still relevant. But, gents, a little bit of NHL news before we launch into everything here. We're waiting on the announcement of which of the 8 teams that was just eliminated in the qualifiers by a fluke will also be eligible with a 12.5% chance of getting the number one overall pick, which is almost decidedly going to be Alexis Lafreniere. So that's just going to be like doing a 180 within about a 24 to 48 hour period for some of these teams in terms of their fortune. Dan, any quick comments about maybe who you're rooting for in that regard, or who you don't want definitely not to get it?
Yeah, well, I think as a Flyers fan, we can all say that we do not want the Pittsburgh Penguins and we do not want the New York Rangers to get Lafreniere. I also would say that I don't think Edmonton deserves another number one pick. And I also don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs deserve to have a player like that. So, I'm rooting for the Minnesota Wild or the Nashville Predators or maybe the Winnipeg Jets. Those would be my 3 teams that I wouldn't mind seeing him go to.
Yeah, I'm rooting for the Wild, and yeah, I'm right there with you. The Jets and the Predators, hey, fine. I can see the Wild getting him, or maybe even the Jets, and then they trade Ehlers and finally get a defenseman to replace so much of what they lost. Chef, do you have a preference?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I would like to see the Wild. One, because it's just such a good hockey area, up in that whole region, that they deserve it. And also, I wouldn't be upset if it was Nashville as well, because Nashville has proven that they can support a hockey team. They're very behind their hockey team there. So I think either one of them I'd be satisfied with.
Cool. You keep an eye on your Twitter feed. One of those hockey insiders will give you the update as it comes along. and hopefully it'll be good news for the Philadelphia Flyers. And that's it, gents. We have to talk about the Flyers. The Flyers went undefeated in the round robin, outscoring the opposition 11-3, coming off victories versus Washington and Tampa Bay since we last spoke to you. And now, of course, like I said, getting ready for that round of 16 matchup versus the upset-minded Montreal Canadiens. Dan, why don't you give us kind of like your recap of what happened in the Washington and Tampa games, and how does that make you feel going into the quarterfinals here?
Yeah, I thought that the Flyers were going to improve their seeding during this round robin. I picked them to end up with the number 2 seed. They did better than even I thought. Look, they gave up 1 goal in each of the 3 games to the Bruins, the Caps, and the Lightning. And I thought both against the Caps and the Lightning that for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the game that the Caps and Lightning maybe got the better of the play. Certainly Tampa in the first 10 minutes. Carter Hart made some big saves, and then the Flyers just kind of turned it on. The Tampa game was the real match for number 1, because at that point both those teams were 2-0, and so a lot of hype going in for that game. And the Flyers just their relentless forecheck came out. They got a goal about halfway through the first period, and then they just took over the game for the next period and a half. Nicholas Aube-Kubel got a couple well-deserved goals. Shane Gostisbehere was probably the number 1 story of the game for me for the Flyers, just because he's a guy that didn't play in the first 2 games. He got a shot in the 3rd game, knowing that if he had any chance of getting a spot for game 1 of the playoffs, that he'd really have to perform well and beat out Robert Haig. And he did. I mean, he should be in the lineup for that game 1 because he was playing with energy. He said after the knee surgery that this is the best he's been feeling in 2 years, and you could see it. He's skating all over the ice. He made a great play at the blue line on the first goal, threw it towards the net. Nicholas Aube-Kubel with a terrific deflection. Then the Flyers get another goal on a 2-on-1 with Couturier and Aube-Kubel. And the goal of the game was 2-1 Flyers. The next goal was the one that was going to decide the game in my mind. And Sean Couturier, with an incredible play behind the net, he kind of poked the puck away from the Tampa defender, right to Shane Gostisbehere. And before you could blink, Gostisbehere had it off his stick, pass through the crease, right to Joel Farabee, who buried it top shelf. I mean, it was fantastic, and that was the deciding goal in the game. Carter Hart stopped 2 or 3 breakaways. Just a fitting conclusion to the round robin for the Flyers, who were absolutely tremendous in all 3 games. And they got the number 1 seed, and they gotta now basically come out and do the same thing against Montreal.
Yeah, they were buzzing. You're right about that Gostisbehere pass. First, Couturier, like you said, made a great play to get it over to him, and you didn't even have to bat an eyelash, and it was right on Farabee's stick, and Farabee got enough of it to just get it past the goalie, and yeah, that was terrific. The Tampa game was kind of after Hedman went down, you could see a little bit of a sag from Tampa. And I think the Flyers were buoyed by that. But after that 3rd goal, I felt like Tampa really had a lot of zone time. And the Flyers were running around a little bit. But to their credit, Chef, even though they were trapped in their zone a lot of that 3rd period, they did seem to keep the shots to one and done, and also not of the highest quality. There were a few, but considering the amount of zone time, I thought that was at least a good development in that regard.
Yeah, pretty much all that play was kept at the perimeter, and I actually think the announcers actually said that it's like Tampa Bay is a lot of possession time here, but it's not quality, and push to the outside. I think on the power play, I don't even know it was the power play, and I think in the 3rd period, I don't even think they got a shot on net. They were in the zone. But the Flyers kept them to the perimeter. I thought it was great. I thought it was overall very, very, very good effort all around. There were a couple things, Niski seemed to be out of place. Not all, 2 or 3 occasions. I think he was on the ice both breakaways too. But I mean, I'm nitpicking here at this point. I mean, I thought they did an overall job. The forechecking was amazing. Aside from even on top of his 2 goals, Knack, forget that. I mean, he was forechecking like a beast. They created their own chances. That fourth line, I think, and it might call me crazy because looking at the score sheet, though, I don't think I was so crazy in a qualifying round. Is it really came down to the third and fourth lines are the ones that were making a difference there. I think it could possibly come down to the fourth line in some of these series.
Well, you get a lot of that, Dan, in the playoffs. I mean, if you look at the Flyers' scoring depth, you hear names like Lawton with 3 goals, Aube-Kubel with 2, and Nate Thompson, Phil Myers, Travis Sanheim, Michael Raffl, Farabee, Pitlick, all with 1. There's some names that aren't in there, mainly Couturier, Voracek, and Giroux, and yet the Flyers were pretty dominant in this little mini tournament.
Yeah, that's almost more amazing to think about, right? The Flyers just sliced through the top 3 seeds like a Ginzu knife, and Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier, nor Jake Voracek scored a goal in any of those 3 games. I mean, that's a scary thought. That Hayes-Lawton-Konechny line really carried them in a couple of those games, and then Nicholas Aube-Kubel and Joel Farabee and Shane Gostisbehere were the real guys in the 3rd game. And so that's going to be something where we don't have Chris Van de Velde on the 4th line anymore. And, you talk about 2 ex-Flyers and Dale Weiss and Jordan Wheel, and those guys are actually on Montreal. So we're going to get to see them play. But those are the kind of guys that you don't really want on the 4th line. Well, the Flyers, who knows what their lineup's going to be. If Voracek practiced today, looks like he'll be back in the lineup. So assuming he slides back onto the 1st line, I mean, our 3rd and 4th line wingers are going to be Van Riemsdyk, Farabee, Pitlick, and Aube-Kubel, with Derek Grant and Nate Thompson in the middle. I mean, none of those lines are easy to play against. And Farabee and Aube-Kubel had tremendous chemistry when they played together in the 2nd game. I also wouldn't be shocked if they have Voracek, or if Raffl stays back on or rather Farabee stays back on the 1st line. I would almost go with something like that and maybe move Voracek a little down the lineup. I mean, we'll see what happens, but there's so many permutations of lines that Alain Vigneault can come up with. It's going to be scary for opponents because the Flyers are really just relentless coming at you with those 4 lines.
I agree, and Connor Bunnaman played very well in his appearance, very physical against a physical team. And that's turned out to be a really good decision because, like I had mentioned in a couple of shows before, you wanted to get those first reserves some time. We saw what effect that had with Shane Gostisbehere. And I think getting back to that, something I meant to comment on, I think Shane Gostisbehere can earn his way back into the lineup. I think a lot of it would be predicated upon the matchups against certain teams, like maybe against Washington or Boston. He might want Robert Haig against a speed team like Montreal or Tampa. I could see where Gostisbehere and that kind of quick decision making, would be an asset. So the Flyers have a lot of versatility, like you mentioned, and a lot of it also with this whole round robin tournament. It brings not only to mind the depth, but also the decision making by AV. Getting Elliott that game in there, that turned out to be a good move. And now I think you have to, moving forward, if God forbid, if Carter had to miss a couple games, you're going to feel better. Elliott had a strong appearance against the Caps. And Flyers are really doing a lot well right now. And apparently that's resonating throughout the bubble shift. The Flyers seem to be the talk of the Toronto little inner circle there.
Of course. I mean, They've dispatched their teams. What's the difference? 11-3 in scoring.
11-3.
Yeah, 3 times, almost 3 times, almost 4 times the amount. So, I mean, there's always, I heard a lot of talk about some people talking about Blue Jackets how they don't want to play the Blue Jackets around. I think if you look around the league right now, there's a lot of teams going, how do we not play against the Flyers? How do we dodge that bullet? Nobody wants to end up being like the Tampa Bay of this round this year.
No, nobody does. I mean, I think the Flyers and the Canes really are the teams that that, teams are looking at to maybe avoid or, get some momentum, get their game together before they get in gear. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Dan, there were some areas that, particularly in an article by Bill Meltzer, where he called to into question some of the things the Flyers want to improve upon as they go into the Montreal series, particularly their power play, get some more goals from some of the bigger name players, and closing out some of these games with some failed clears and some detail-oriented stuff that they want to improve upon moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the concerns for the Flyers would be you really need to find a way to get that power play going, because the power play was sort of non-existent for them, in these 3 games. And you also want to find a way to get that, top line going. So those are kind of like the 2 main things to me that the Flyers can really improve upon. The good news for them is that Montreal doesn't have a particularly good penalty kill or power play, so it's a pretty good matchup from that respect. It looks like the New York Rangers, by the way. Is this the Rangers? Hold on. I can't tell if it's the Wild or the Rangers.
Rangers.
Yep, the New York Rangers have the number 1 pick in the draft. Unbelievable. I guess it's better than the Penguins, right?
I guess the Rangers are a team on the come, though. The Penguins are a wilting flower, and there's no way around that. The Rangers, this just adds to the idea that this team's going to really be dangerous going forward. But, oh well.
They've gotten lucky with those. They got the 2nd pick last year and got Capo Caco. Well,
there you go. And so there it is. The New York Rangers can add another star-level player. But as we saw with Jack Hughes, it might not happen right away for this player. So, while King Henry is being shown the door, and they're going to be counting on a lot of youngsters besides some of the holdovers there, and guys like Panarin, we'll just have to see what goes on down the road. But
yeah, I mean, I still think the Rangers, as we saw from that series against the Canes, they're more than just one player away from becoming like a legit cup contender.
Oh yeah.
So it obviously Shesterkin was injured in that series, but not to get too far off track, but the Rangers, I think that's better for the Flyers, obviously, than if the Penguins or the Leafs got that pick.
Well, I definitely agree with you there. Chef, any comments? I got another league news info bit here to share. Go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it wasn't the Penguins, and I'll just be, or the Leafs, and I'll be very happy. So there, go to your news.
Yes. Okay. Well, just a quick flash here. Dale Talon is out in Florida, and while Chaika is out in Arizona, there is no info as to his replacement. They're in the playoffs right now, and that's what they're concerned with. But the Dale Talon story is an interesting one, bringing in Coach Q, spending oodles of bucks on Sergei Bobrovsky, who underperformed, to say the least. And the early favorites on this are Mike Fuda, ex of the LA Kings, and of course Ron Hextall. I think Fuda's got a better chance without some of the baggage that Ron Hextall had. Dan, you want to weigh in on that real briefly?
Someone made a joke on Twitter today that if Hextall was named the GM of, I think it was actually Dan, our buddy Dan, that if Hextall was named the GM of Florida and they got Lafreniere, that he'd keep him in the AHL for 4 years. But I hope that Ron Hextall gets another GM gig. I hope though that he's learned from what happened in Philadelphia. Like, you see people saying, "Oh, I wish Ron Hextall was still here to see what he built." Yeah. Ron Hextall did a phenomenal job drafting players and kind of helping to develop them. But the key to this team really taking the next step was getting rid of David Haxtell, bringing in Alain Vigneault, and honestly, Chuck Fletcher did a better job with free agency and trades than Ron Hextall did. So there's some things that Ron Hextall is very good at. There's some other things that he's not so good at. In addition to the things I just mentioned, he really sort of did things that alienated the team's alumni. So, Ron Hextall, the way that he was as a GM as the Flyers is almost like what you want your director of scouting to be. Like,
right.
To prove that he can become a real GM, there's a lot of things that Ron Hextall is going to have to do differently than what he did in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, I would also credit Hextall with installing protocols like the developmental process and developmental coaches and things like that, the fitness, just bringing things up to date, modernizing, if you will. But, yeah, I agree. On the pro side, Ron Hextall's unproven. He really couldn't improve the NHL roster, and when he did try to do so, even in a minor way with the lower lines, he basically he struck out most of the time. So he's going to have to convince somebody that he sees the error of his ways and is capable of moving forward and doing a better job. That's one of the reasons I think Mike Fuda has an inside track on that. But, you'll hear more and more about that. Just an update on Jake Voracek. Charlie O'Connor is tweeting out that the Flyers did let go some video from today's practice, more on AV being silent because Claude Julien is now silent. So this is a silence of the Lambs. But Jake was on the first unit power play today. So even though he's a game time decision, if we're crossing our fingers, that would seem to indicate that he is more likely than not to play tomorrow, depending on, I guess, on how he feels. So, that we'll be waiting on that particular update. So it's Montreal. And, Chef, did you have a chance to check out what Montreal was able to do with Pittsburgh, winning that series and upsetting the Penguins, and a little bit of scuttlebutt coming out of the Pittsburgh locker room that there was a sense of entitlement that they really, they were a 5 that had to play the 12, and it's almost like they were acting like they shouldn't have had to go through this, but things don't work that way.
Yeah, I did see, I think, 2 of the games. Maybe 1.5. I was flicking around a lot because there was just, well, let me just say, there was so much good hockey this last week. I kind of like, I'm like looking for, I forgot, it stops today. They got to do other things, the qualifying round and round robin were done. So you get used to sitting and parking in front of your TV for 12 hours a day. It must have been like, I feel like I'm getting ripped off now. I have to wait 2 days for more hockey, but no. But I also thought I saw like a game and a half, and I was just thinking, they're not. I don't see the urgency. To me, it didn't seem like there was an urgency. I didn't want to say entitlement, but an urgency. Like, don't worry about it. We got it. We're the Pittsburgh Penguins kind of thing. And to their credit, they just got out hustled by Montreal. It seemed like Montreal was a hungrier dog. That's all. I mean, their forechecking was good. They were. It seemed like they were. I don't know exactly how fast the Montreal team is, but it seemed like they were a lot faster than Pittsburgh, or maybe they just wanted it more. That's my take on it anyway.
Well, certainly the Canadiens, and we'll talk about it more, certainly could skate with Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh is. I was listening to Russ Cohen today or the other day talking about how they live on a counterattack. Well, you can only do so much of that versus the Canadiens because they skate so well. The defensive structure is really good. And Dan, that's not going to work out if you have a guy like Carey Price on his game. I think he was his ERA was at like 9.47 or something crazy, just underneath Carter Hart. And they were living on the big saves, and then they would come back down, and they would get their goal opportunistically, and it just frustrated Pittsburgh taking that series in 4 games.
Yeah, what's interesting is that Carey Price really wasn't very good during the regular season. I mean, by his standards, he had a really subpar year. He had a .909 save percentage, a .279 goals against average, and fast forward to these playoffs. I mean, maybe he was a little banged up and he had some time to kind of regroup both mentally and physically, but he was fantastic against the Penguins. The Penguins, I thought, carried the play for most of this series, and I thought they lost for a couple reasons. One was that Carey Price was phenomenal. 2 was that Shea Weber, the big, huge defenseman for Montreal, was also fantastic. And the other reason was that I just didn't think Evgeny Malkin came to play. And he's a guy that, sometimes he needs a little bit of time to get revved up. And Pittsburgh, what makes him so dangerous is that you've got Crosby and Malkin who can both beat you. And, Crosby was okay, but I thought Malkin really didn't play all that well. And then they had some bad turnovers from guys like Jack Johnson and whatnot. But, I think that I think Montreal won the series because of Carey Price and also because of Shea Weber's play. And I think the Flyers are overwhelming favorites in this series. Montreal has a kind of a relentless style, a little bit like the Flyers do, except that the Flyers have more top-end talent. It's going to be interesting to see, which line they match up the Couturier line with, because the Canadiens don't necessarily have like a go-to line. I mean, the Brendan Gallagher, is probably the guy that you're going to have Couturier out there trying to match up with. But they've got some dangerous young players in Kotkaniemi and Nick Suzuki, who had a really good season. Nick Suzuki, who played with Isaac Ratcliffe, the Flyers prospect, for a while in juniors. But they've got an interesting mix. And no superstars, but on the front end, obviously Shea Weber and Carey Price. So, the key is the Flyers are just going to have to be absolutely relentless and not get down if they go long periods of time during games without being able to beat Carey Price, because that's just the way it is. And the other thing is that Carter Hart is going to have to, he's playing against his childhood idol in Carey Price. And the Flyers have played Montreal once in the regular season with Carter Hart in net. He was a little bit starstruck. He got pulled in the first period. And even when reporters were asking him questions this week, you can tell his eyes kind of light up. Yeah, Carey Price is my idol. I got a chance to meet him for the first time this week, and it was fantastic. Carter Hart's going to have to shake that off, and he's going to have to play on a level comparable with Carey Price for the Flyers to win the series.
Yep, you can't be starstruck. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger was kind of intimidated when he had to face off against his idol, Reg Park. This is a bodybuilding Eeyore. So he decided he had to destroy his idol by defeating him, and that's what he did, and he went on, and now he's Arnold. And no, it's not a brain tumor. Anyway, so, yes, sir. Yeah, Kindergarten Cop in the news.
I'm a big Schwarzenegger fan, so I love it. You know what? I watched all his movies when I was a kid. I was just a huge Schwarzenegger fan, so I appreciate it. Commando was my favorite, I think.
Oh, that was a good one. That was the one with Alyssa Milano. Was that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just real fast before we get on board with Alex Appleyard, I just wanted to go through a recap of the qualifying round. So the Islanders beat Florida in 4 games. Toronto and Columbus, that went down to the last game. A lot of drama there, but in the end, Columbus takes it 3-2. The Hurricanes just pretty much wiped out the Rangers, but the Rangers don't care. Montreal beats Pittsburgh 3-1. Vancouver over the Wild 3-1. Calgary defeats the depleted Winnipeg Jets. A lot of injuries in that first game with Scheifele and Laine, so they take that one 3-1. And Arizona beats Nashville. Nashville's a team we're going to talk about in future episodes, because I think they got a lot of reshuffling there, a lot of things going on there. So that's just a recap of what happened there. And of course, in the round robin, your East winner, number 1 seed is of course our Philadelphia Flyers, and in the West it is the Vegas Golden Knights, who are getting Max Pacioretty back. Apparently he had to go on quarantine or something like that. He's back, so just wanted to cover that. Chef, any last little bits before we hook up with Mr. Alex Appleyard from The Athletic Philadelphia?
No, looking forward to talking to Alex, though.
Yeah, these brackets are really good. Just before we head over there, just a recap of what's going on here. So the Flyers are playing the Canadiens. The Lightning are playing the Blue Jackets. Then we have the Capitals playing the Islanders. That'll be interesting. It's always interesting. Barry Trotz, see if he can outsmart his replacement, Todd Reardon. And then we have the Bruins hoping to wake up versus the Canes in, I think is a 50-50 series. And then over in the West, we had the Vegas Golden Knights, what I think is going to be a walk versus Chicago. They got a puncher's chance, but I think Vegas is going to take it. And then we have Colorado playing the Coyotes. Then we have the Stars playing Calgary, and the Blues will face off versus the Vancouver Canucks. Yes, sir. And do we have from the Athletic Philadelphia and Smart Scouting, Alexander Appleyard?
Yes, you do.
Fantastic.
Coming all the way from across the Atlantic.
Yeah. You're a man who's just not one spot. Where are you at right now?
Back in England. I spent the last month in Malta in Italy, which was very nice. And now in England for a bit. Maybe Denmark in 2 months, but I don't know yet. It's all up in the air. Whole coronavirus thing's kind of, plans are fluid now.
Yeah, I can understand that. And there might be people who hear about Malta, and there might be some wrestling fans wondering if you saw any dedication to Baron Mikhail Cicluna, but probably not a lot listening to this podcast. But he was a wrestler who had a claw hold. He was one of those guys. So, Alex, the Flyers are playing the Montreal Canadiens, and I just wanted to get your impressions about, what both teams did to get here. And, of course, Dan and Chef, who are on the line with us, have questions for you as well.
Yeah, look forward to it.
So, Dan, I will turn you loose.
Okay. What's going on, Alex, man? How are you?
I'm pretty good. Surviving. Actually, I've had a pretty enjoyable last month or so after some kind of lockdown hell. So, turning everything up just as the Flyers are, really. That's
right. I love it. Well, I'm glad to hear you're doing well. I know we've been going back and forth on Twitter on some various stuff. And one thing I was interested in from you was, what do you, right now, for game one, because you've kind of been talking about optimizing the lineup, if you were the head coach, what would be, your lines and your defense pairings for game one here against Montreal?
Well, I think going into the round robin, my lines would have been different than what they are now. And quite frankly, a lot of that has been the play of Lawton, Hayes, and connecting together. I knew the line was good at the end of the season, and I think we all knew it was a good line, but I really struggled with the two bottom six centers that they're playing in the current kind of lineup with Grant and Thompson, just because of kind of the lack of speed in that area, and thought, I'd like to see Lawton really ideally move back to center and probably center, JVR and NAK or JVR and Pitlick, a line which worked very well before the deadline. But I think with the hot streak that Lawton's been on from before the deadline now, playing two different positions, and how well that line's clicked, I don't think you can really break that line up. So I think I'd keep that line and kind of build from there. The top line, I think it depends obviously if Voracek is healthy. If Voracek's healthy, I do think I'd have Voracek, Giroux, and Couturier, because towards the end of the season they were just fantastic, and they played really, really well against the Penguins and the Bruins with not much luck. Although Farabee really pushed a case for him being on the top line there. And then in the bottom six, the third line I think is the difficulty. I would have James Van Riemsdyk in the lineup. I know some people have a different opinion than that, but I think the upside he brings, there's no one else in that bottom six who brings that. We all know JVR is a streaky player, and that's why I'd keep him there. If he goes off on one of those streaks, he can win you a series from the third line. And I don't think many other players in that Flyers bottom six, or guys who can sub into that bottom six, can do that. I would also keep Farabee in the lineup. I think he played really well. I think there's potential, if you're going to keep the top six the same, to have Farabee, Van Riemsdyk, and Grant on a line together and kind of shelter them a bit, especially when you have last change. Could be kind of a fun line. And if that doesn't work, potentially flip Voracek and Farabee to add more of a passer onto that third line. And then in terms of the fourth line, I kind of think their hand has been slightly forced with the injury to Raffle. I thought that was extremely unfortunate. Obviously, he played a fantastic role in that first game before getting injured. Personally, I'd put Frost in over Thompson. But that's not going to happen. I think we all know that's not going to happen. So then it comes really down to a decision between Pitlick NAK and Bunnaman, as well as Thompson. I'd put Bunnaman in over Thompson as well, but that I don't think is going to happen. And Thompson, NAK, and Pitlick are going to play. I think the Flyers forward group, even though there's some issues with kind of the speed of the bottom six centers and the lack of creativity there, I don't think it should be too big an issue, and I think they can get through that round against Montreal, really, whatever. And as for the big question, I think probably people have been waiting to talk about, Shane Gostisbehere, how can you leave him out of the lineup? He looked like the Shane Gostisbehere who was a top 10 Norris Trophy nominee. He was electric, and if his knees are both good after those surgeries, and he can play the rest of the playoffs like he did in that third round robin game against Tampa, you've got a really, really good top four defenseman on your third pairing. And sadly, Robert Hegg, who I don't think did anything really wrong in the round robin, actually, he played fine in those two games. He would be the guy who missed out for me.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it and talking through it, to me, Derek Grant, while a serviceable NHL player, is kind of like the big weakness on this team, right? Like, I'm okay with Nate Thompson being the fourth line center, but Grant, if you're going to have a third line center that's going to play between two talented wingers, you kind of wish we had an upgrade there, which makes you wish that either, Nolan Patrick was around or that Morgan Frost had kind of run with his opportunity a little more during the season. I thought he played fine, but they're clearly not ready to thrust him into that kind of role. So one of the interesting things to me is that, we assume we'll have Lawton, Hayes, and Konechny together. I'm intrigued by having Voracek on the third line and Farabee on the first line, because I think that sometimes Giroux, Couturier, and Voracek, they were great at the end of the season. I feel like sometimes the three veterans together maybe can get a little bit stale, and I loved what Farabee brought to that top line. He kind of brings like the youth and enthusiasm that gets, maybe Giroux and Couturier's blood pumping a little more. But mainly, I would think about that switch because I really think that James Van Riemsdyk needs to have a setup guy or a playmaker on his line if he's going to be excelling. And to me, Voracek kind of fits that role a little bit more than Farabee. So that's why, I doubt they'll do it. I'm assuming they'll probably put Voracek back on that first line if he's healthy. But I'd kind of like to see Farabee on that first line and Voracek on the third line because I think it really helps out JVR. He's got to get going and scoring some goals. So we'll see there. I mean, I agree with you on everything else. Your disdain for Nate Thompson's game is funny. He's not coming out of the lineup. But do you put any credence in the fact that you've got this kind of like grizzled veteran who's, plays physically, and I know you're a big analytics guy. What is it that you dislike about Thompson so much?
His just real lack of input beyond the red line. I think especially with the other players he kind of has on his line, he's been playing with Raffle, he's been playing with Pitlick, he's been playing with NAK, and those guys are guys who really do have some offensive ability as well and are quick players. The slowest of those three might be Michael Raffle, and Michael Raffle is a really, really fast player in a straight line. And I think he really looks behind the play a lot. He can hold his own in the defensive zone when he's set up, but he can still lose assignments simply due to speed in the neutral zone. And he was obviously a Montreal Canadien this season. But against the Canadiens, one thing that they really, really don't lack is speed. And if they get caught in a bottom six matchup where he's going up against guys like Paul Byron and Arturi Leikkanen and even Jordan Wheel, I can see situations where he just gets abused in the speed game. That and the lack of offense do make me worry about him slightly. In my estimation, he's effectively he should be a 14th forward on this team, and I'd probably put Bunnaman in for him and Frost for sure in for him. But I think we all know that's not gonna happen.
Yep. The last thing I've got for you is more of like a comment than anything, is because me and Alex were kind of all along hoping that the Flyers were going to sign the young Swedish blue liner Linus Ogberg, to an entry-level contract, and so Alex, that was pretty great to see that happen, right? Because I didn't think that we were going to see that happen.
Yeah, I was very happy for him, very happy for his whole family. He's a really great kid, very good player. He's really shown some really high-level ability in the Swedish Hockey League, especially his skating and his defensive acumen. I think he's the kind of guy who is an Anton Stralman light. You know, he's a perfect kind of modern-day defenseman who, if he keeps developing, could be a good, really good bottom pairing defenseman set down the line. So I was really happy about that. I mean, it had been in the works for a while. They intended to sign him kind of a few weeks, 3 to 4 weeks before, and it was just tying up details on the contract. So I wasn't so stressed going into the last few weeks of it. I had an inclination he would get signed. But yeah, I'm glad they signed him because he's a real valuable depth asset for the organization.
Yep, Alex did a great interview with him, I believe, over at The Athletic.
Yeah, I spoke to him in depth for, I think, a good hour. Probably maybe a year or so ago now. And he's a really nice guy, very accommodating. I think the media over in North America, once he gets to the Phantoms, will really enjoy speaking to him because he's a very open guy who will pretty much answer anything you have to ask him. Yeah,
and they certainly could use the depth right now, waiting on guys like Cam York and Zamula. Although we don't know if Zamula could be a Flyer next year, the way they're talking. But so Alex, I just want to ask you about the Canadiens lineup. Do you anticipate they're going to stick with the Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, and Danault with Max Domi in a fourth line down the middle? Or do you think they're up for some changes based on what they think could work better against the Flyers?
I mean, I think they're willing to adapt. We saw that in the Penguins series. They started off with that big line, the Gallagher, Danault, and Tatar, basically the best three players. In my estimation, the best 3-5 players they have on a line together. And kind of halfway through this series, they switched it up and put Danault down on a line with Laakkonen and Byron. Immense speed on the wings, and Danault's high IQ and really good defensive acumen, along with some creativity as well. And that line kind of went to town on the Penguins, actually. Won their matchups really heavily. And the other line that really impressed me in that series, it didn't really get spoken about half as much. And once again, it was a line change. Later in the series, they put Tatar and Gallagher between Suzuki, and it didn't really work. But Kotkaniemi, his play all series was really impressive. He started off with Byron and Laakkonen, and that was their best line in the first couple of games. And then they switched him and put him between Armia and Drouin. And I'm not the biggest Armia or Drouin fan, but Kotkaniemi and those two together really kind of clicked in the last couple of games, and was a good line for them, while the Suzuki line struggled. I think they'll probably go into the series with the same line they finished the Penguins with Danault between those two fast wingers in Byron and Laakkonen, Kotkaniemi with Armia and Drouin, and Suzuki, Gallagher, Tatar, and hope they get going. And then on the fourth line, it'll be interesting to see if it's Wheel, Weiss, and Domi, or if they put Belzile in there. But I'm a really big Nick Suzuki fan. But if Nick Suzuki can't get going in the series versus the Flyers, I really struggle to see the Montreal Canadiens match the Flyers. Because as much as I like Danault, I don't think he can outmatch Couturier with Laakkonen and Byron on his wings. Maybe he'd have a better chance with Tatar and Gallagher. But if they load up on that big line with Danault, Tatar, and Gallagher, then, arguably, your second best line is Kotkaniemi, and they'd probably put Kotkaniemi back between potentially Armia and Drouin. And I don't think that line's really going to do much damage against, say, Kevin Hayes. As good as Kotkaniemi's going to be, he's not quite that player yet, even though he shows flashes. So it'll be really interesting to see how long that lasts for, and if they do put that big line back together.
Kotkaniemi, is that a Couturier Jr. in the making?
I think he has some of the attributes to be, an exceptional two-way forward. I don't think he quite has the offensive upside that Couturier has. I think he's probably more kind of it sounds cliche to name a Finn, but off the top of my head, a Mikko Koivu upside kind of guy. He's not Mikko Koivu. They play quite a different game in some degrees, but a guy who's going to score, 60, 65 points in a couple of years and be in the conversation for a top 5 Selke nominee. I really rate his game, and he was fun to watch during the Penguins series. I thought he played a fantastic series and kind of went under the radar slightly.
Yeah, he had a real roller coaster kind of a year. I mean, when sent down to the Laval Rocket. But, with this break that we had, Alex, it was almost like an off season. So you get some growth, physical growth with the player. and that seems to have worked out very well for him.
Yep. He looked like he went into the break still, a boy and came out of it a man, to be very cliched, although, he's not exactly a small guy to begin with, over 6'2", 200 and something pounds now, but against the Penguins, he matched up versus Crosby and Malkin at times, and he won his matchups every single game pretty much. He played a really, really impressive series for a younger player, and at times, he was kind of covering for Drouin quite heavily as well, and trying to let Drouin do some of his stuff, and that's not an easy role to play for a 20-year-old. So he's one to watch. I think he's probably the player that I would tell Flyers fans to really watch for in the series, because a lot of the series is a big role for his 20-year-old shoulders, but a lot of this series, if the Canadiens are going to have success, yes, Carey Price is going to have to be amazing, Shea Weber's going to have to be good, the big guys of Danault, Tatar, and Gallagher are going to have to play well, but I think Kotkaniemi's input into the series is going to be one of the things that, if he plays really well, maybe they could push the Flyers a bit, because he's the 2C right now after Danault. Suzuki hasn't impressed in these play-ins, and Domi's stuck on the fourth line between fourth liners effectively.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there, but one of the things I do think the Flyers can exploit is some of the defensive depth that the Canadiens lack. They're getting great play right now out of Weber and Sherratt, and that's a shock. And I was never ever impressed with Ben Sherratt, and of course Jeff Petrie scoring that big goal late in the game, in I think we're the third game. But the rest, you're talking about yeoman defensemen, Kulak, Wallet, and Mete. Mete, I think, is going to be a good player in the future, but I think there's a depth issue that the Flyers can exploit if they can roll those lines and wear these guys down and get some mistakes out of these players.
Yeah, I think we saw in the first round, really, the Ouellet-Mete pairing were very, very fortunate at times not to kind of concede a bit more. I think they played well defensively, but they were just stuck in their own zone so much. They kept stuff to the outside, but that was pretty much their only contribution to that series versus the Penguins. And a bit of worse luck, and they could have been rolled over a game for another loss. As for the top four, I think Shearer is completely held up by Shea Weber.
Yeah.
I think Shea Weber's decline has been overstated over the last few years. I think he's played on some mediocre teams, and had to be asked to provide a lot of offense for mediocre teams, and neglect some of his defensive duties in doing that. And he's dragged around Shearer, and I think Shearer's an NHL defenseman, but he's a third pairing guy. And Weber kind of dragged him around and makes him look pretty good. As for the Petrie-Kulak pairing, they were pretty good against the Penguins. They really held their own in that kind of secondary role and were very good defensively, actually. And Kulak, I've watched him a few times this year, and he seems to have slightly came into his own since leaving Calgary. I never really watched him very much with Calgary, apart from the passing game here or there. But he's this year with Montreal. Whenever I kind of watch them, he's not going to do anything past the red line, pretty much. But he looks solid defensively. And then Jeff Petrie is a really underrated defenseman. But when you match up the Flyers and the Canadiens defensive group, I think Weber and Petrie matches okay, fine, kind of evens, I guess, against Provorov, Niskanen as the top two guys. But when you start getting into 3, 4, 5, and 6, Kulak and Shearer, I don't think are really a scratch on Sanheim and Myers as the number 3, 4 defensemen. And then you have Mete and Ouellet, and the potential that Gostisbehere is going to come into the series as the number 5, 6 defenseman. As a guy who was a top 10 Norris vote a couple of years ago, and if he's healthy and can play at a similar level to that, or even the level he played in 2018-19, where he paced for 40 points and was okay, that blows everything the Montreal Canadiens have on their third pairing completely out of the water, and that could be something that helps tip the series in the Flyers' favor as well. That depth on defense. If we're talking about Justin Braun as a number 4 defenseman, there's an argument to be made that on the Montreal Canadiens he'd be probably the number 4 when he's the number 6 on the Flyers.
Right, exactly. And we were talking before you got on about how Shane Gostisbehere, he could be against a speed team like Montreal. He could be considered more of an asset, or Robert Haig might be preferred by the coaches if they're slogging around versus the Capitals or the Bruins. And maybe, we'll see what AV does right now, my gut feeling is that Haig will probably start to get the first shot. Could definitely see if we do have a revitalized Gostisbehere, that's a whole other dimension, especially if he could work his way onto the second unit power play and give them a boost. And I guess that really comes down to one of the areas the Flyers need to improve in going into this series to try and solve the riddle that Carey Price can be.
Yeah, Carey Price in the last few years has been maligned at times. He hasn't played kind of, to his complete peak levels where he was just completely dominant a couple of years ago. But he's still a good goalie and has been pretty consistently good. He's maybe had 1 year where he's been really below average, and even this year before the break he was an above average goalie around the NHL. He played well, and since he came in the play-in against the Penguins, he effectively won them the series. I felt the Penguins outplayed Montreal in general. As good as Danault and the Kotkaniemi lines played, I think the Penguins played better. And Carey Price put up what a .95 something save percentage, .94 something save percentage,
947 or something like that, yeah.
To win them the series, and was frankly exceptional. 3 out of the 4 games he played, he was brilliant. So if that Carey Price shows up in the play and in the first round of the playoffs, the Flyers will potentially have some issues. But even if that Carey Price shows up, I still think the Flyers can overcome the Canadiens.
Well, if the Flyers have vulnerabilities, it appears, if you go by the regular season that just passed, the Flyers had 2 overtime wins and then a 4-1 loss in the second game of a road home back-to-back. But the Flyers did seem to struggle. They couldn't seem to get their forecheck going against Montreal, and a lot of that owes itself to the speed and dedication to details and the defensive system that the Canadiens have. What do you think the Flyers are going to do maybe a little bit differently with regard to dump-ins, controlled entries? And these are important aspects of the game when you play Montreal.
Well, funnily enough, Jack Hann, the former Hockey Ops Maple Leafs assistant, who's an assistant coach of the Marlies as well, who's put out a book about kind of modern hockey tactics this year, tweeted out a piece today where he's collaborated with Corey Schneider, who's been doing, underlying statistics for years now.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really great at it. Some great, interesting stuff. And they collaborated on an article talking about the Flyers' forecheck under Alain Vigneault and how they played kind of a split 2-1-2. So they send in 2 guys, the forward 1 and forward 2, kind of hot. The near side defenseman creeps up and pinches on the boards. The other defenseman rotates, and the center is kind of quite key, the third forward, in blocking those lanes and creating pressure. And I think that's, I've not watched those Montreal games back with any great detail since they were played, but I think that's the one thing that's probably really key against the Canadiens if they're going to play that aggressive forecheck, to make sure they don't get out with any speed. Because outside, quite frankly, of Weber and Petrie, and, Ouellet and Mite do have some skill in that aspect, but they haven't really shown it so far in their careers. They don't really have defensemen who move the puck very well under pressure. It's more the forwards and the wingers coming back to relieve that pressure. Laken, Byron, Armia, Gallagher, Tatar. Those 5 especially are fantastic wingers in my estimation at just kind of smaller details. Tatar is one of the most underrated defensive wingers in the NHL. Gallagher is one of the best 2-way wingers in the NHL, who's in a fantastic 5v5 offensive threat. Armia's very detail-oriented. And Paul Byron, Claude Giroux's childhood friend, is one of the fastest players in the NHL, and also a fantastic defensive player. And I think picking up those wingers, sweeping back into the zone from the neutral zone, the centers will be really key in regards to that. And yeah, I think the Han article was put out kind of a perfect time for that, to talk about that, because I think that's one place that Montreal, you need to, that first pass, if you put pressure on that first pass, 4 out of 6 of their defensemen might not be able to make those first passes time after time. And pressure the wingers, dropping back into the zone with the center. I think then you'll start to really see them crumble under pressure. Because if those wingers aren't getting clean passes from defensemen who aren't amazing puck movers, then potentially it could cause some fits for them. Because you can't play Shea Weber and Jeff Petrie 45 minutes a game each.
Right, that's always the issue, and the Flyers are definitely going to have the depth advantage up front and in back. Just wanted to ask you, what's your feeling about the emergence of Myers and Sanheim as a pair? They look like they both could ascend to top pairing status on most squads.
Yeah. Travis Sanheim, I've been an enormous fan of him for a very long time. Watching him for the Calgary Hitmen in the WHL, there was something special straight away. The way he walks the blue line, the way he still walks the blue line is kind of incomparable to most people in the NHL. He's a big guy, rangy, fantastic skater with really high skill level. I mean, we saw that with his goal in the round robin from the Hayes pass. It's just an absolutely beautiful goal that not many defensemen in the league can make.
Yeah.
The talent has always been there, and he was very good for the Flyers last year as well. I think the start of this year he had some real teething problems. It seemed like at times he was Bambiing a lot, which is really strange for him considering how good he usually is in his skates. And he had a period before Christmas where he seemed he fell down every other game, leading to a chance against. But since being paired with Myers, after Christmas, I thought Travis Sanheim was at least the Flyers' second best defenseman and arguably up there with Provorov, vying for being the best defenseman in terms of overall impact on the game. Travis Sanheim, for me, one of my favorite defensemen to watch around the league is Dougie Hamilton, who the Flyers might face down the line with the Carolina Hurricanes. And Sanheim does a lot of things that Dougie Hamilton does extremely well. As he's getting a bit older and more mature in the NHL, there really aren't many flaws to his game. The only thing that frustrates me ever with Travis Sanheim is, surprisingly for such an aggressive player usually, he's quite passive at his own blue line and sits off defensemen and kind of lets them walk past him sometimes and maybe doesn't channel them well enough. And I think that's where Phil Myers comes in. Since they've been paired together, Phil Myers is exceptional at just that. They aren't dissimilar players in their love of getting into the rush and, the big, rangy guys with great skating, but I think the one difference in them is Sanheim's more skilled, and Myers is slightly more aggressive defensively, with a better understanding of gap coverages. And I think since they've been paired together, Myers has plugged that one real weakness in Sanheim's game at this venture and made them a fantastic pairing together. Provorov has, since he's entered the NHL, been very, very good at blue line defense, but Phil Myers this year might even have been better than Provorov over his career so far, and that's not hyperbole. He's fantastic there, and he makes guys dump in pucks. He causes them hell with that combination of mobility and reach as well as aggressiveness. He steps up to a guy at a blue line. If they dump it past him, he's going to beat them to the dumping. If they try and take him on physically, they're going to fall flat on their asses. And if they try and outskill him, then he's going to be aggressive and probably put them into next week. Players you see back off him, they don't like trying to go up against Phil Myers at the blue line. And that opens up a lot of space for Travis Sanheim, and I think that's one of the reasons they've been such an effective pairing, and they were before the break for coronavirus as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think between those two and Provorov, they could have a combination that is right there with what I consider the best defensive pairing in Flyers history, with Brad McCrimmon and Mark Howe. Dan, I just wanted to get you in here because I know you have a commitment to make. So if you have any last comments or questions for Alex, now would probably be a good time for you.
No, it's just, it's always great to have Alex, or the professor as I call him, on the show. It's always fun talking hockey with him. I mean, there's very few people as knowledgeable about prospects and, hockey analytics and hockey in general as Alex. So it's just great that he was able to join us.
Thanks for the kind words. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. I second that. That's for sure. Alex, how do you see this going? Like, I guess it's prediction time, but maybe just like, how do you see it going, not only in terms of games, but the flow and the ebb and flow of the game? Like, how do you envision this series going?
I think both teams will try and come out of the gate aggressive from the off. I think that's one of both teams' real strengths. The Flyers are an aggressive forechecking team who might not hit very heavily on the forecheck, but channel opponents really well, try and cause them trouble, and stay right up in their faces all the time and love getting to the net. And Montreal Canadiens rely on their speed a hell of a lot, and like putting teams under pressure, like causing them issues in that regard. So I think both teams, from the off, I don't think there'll be too much kind of feeling out of each other. I think they'll both kind of go for the throat. I just think the Flyers are in a better position to go for the throat than Montreal are. And with the Flyers having home ice advantage, I think that plays into their hands massively, because they can get Couturier and Hayes against who they want to.
Yeah, I have the Flyers having a little bit of trouble with Montreal's speed and their defensive scheme, but I'm picking the Flyers in 6. What do you say?
I've actually gone back and forward on this for like the last probably 48 hours. I've been thinking 4-1 or 4-2, quite frankly. But I think if Carey Price continues this form, it's going to be same as you, 4-2.
Okay. Now, Chef, let's get you in here. What's your pick with this series?
Flyers win in 5, 4-1. I also had a question, like, for Alex. We were talking about, like, the speed being the difference. Do you think that because of the way Farabee played this past game, I mean, not just with a goal. I mean, I can recall 2 or 3 times at least where he had a really good forechecking play, broke up a puck in the neutral zone, broke up a play there. His defensive game has really popped this past game, as well as Knack. I don't think Knack got a lot of credit for his last game. He did score 2 goals, but he had, like, I think at least 4 or 5 hits. I'm guessing. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but are these ways to get the Flyers a little bit more speed and a little bit more area in there where they might play? We were talking about maybe moving board check out, but is that a possible way that Farabee won that spot just for that reason?
I think there's potential, especially considering that Couturier and Giroux, while not slow, they're probably 2 of now the bottom 6 on the Flyers in terms of speed and top-end speed, potentially. So Farabee does add a bit of speed in that area, and I think, for me, I was watching actually back the 2010 playoffs this week. I was watching some of the Boston series and some of the Montreal series, and I think everyone remembers that was kind of the playoffs where Claude Giroux announced himself to the world as a guy who's going to be a fantastic player in the next few years, with that fantastic shift against Boston, and then obviously game-winning goal against Chicago, and being up there along with the Briere line as one of the most important players in that run.
Yeah.
And if the Flyers are going to go on a run like that, again, I think there's going to be a player who stands out like Giroux did as a young player, and I think that guy could be Joel Farabee. We saw 10-game stretches from him this year as a 19-year-old where he looked like he was going to score every other game. If it wasn't for all those pesky offsides, and maybe it's a year too soon, but maybe Joel Farabee has the kind of a playoff series like Giroux did kind of against Boston in 2010, where he really announces himself to the world, because I think it's going to come sooner or later. Joel Farabee, I think one thing that's been underrated about him this year is he's been a 19-year-old, and most of the year he's been playing out of position. He's a left winger who's been playing right wing and played with aplomb in that position. He's the kind of guy who, Simon Garnier is a great flyer, and Joel Farabee at the junior levels at times looked a lot like Simon Garnier. Fantastic two-way game, aggressive, gritty, great penalty killer, a fantastic shot. And hopefully this is the playoffs where Joel Farabee can announce himself like Giroux did 10 years ago.
Well, if he's 3/4 of Simon Garnier, I'd be very happy. Simon was something else, especially with Forsberg. That was a treat. But Alex, before we go, I just figured we'd get your opinion going around the league with these quarterfinals, and we're going to run some predictions by you. And I just want to get your opinion, what you think is going to happen in the 7 other series that are going on. And starting with the Capitals and the Islanders, what do you see going on there based on regular season and what you saw in some of these qualifiers and these round robin games?
I think the Islanders are a really interesting team. I mean, they're a team that are kind of a pain in the ass, really, to play against in a lot of ways. They're one of the best coached teams, I think, in the NHL. They don't kind of have the abundance of talent that a lot of other teams have. Don't get me wrong, they have Basil, who's a fantastic, exciting player, and they have, a guy like Eberle who's talented, Bailey, Lee. But they don't kind of have the talent of the rest of the East, but kind of stick there with everyone and annoy them every single game. I think Washington will win the series. I think they have too much talent not to. When you have Backstrom and Kuznetsov as your top 2 centers, 2 legitimate first-line centers as your top centers, Alex Ovechkin, if Carlson's healthy. Tom Wilson's grown into a really good player, as much as I hate him when he's playing our team in the last few years. And then they get depth scoring as well from some fantastic young players. Vrana's just about to, I think, announce himself to the world at some point or later as a legitimate high-end top 6 player. I think Washington will win that series, but I think it'll be close. I think it's there's a couple of series in the East that I think will be very exciting to watch. Maybe the Islanders-Washington won't be exciting to watch from a kind of how the hockey's played at times perspective, but I think it will be tense all the way through. I would guess Capitals 4-2, with the Islanders really frustrating them when they have last change in those 3 games.
Yeah, I could definitely see 6 games with that one myself. Chef, do you have any a number that or who you're picking with that one?
Oh, I have the Isles in 7.
Okay. You think?
I just think it'll be a wear down game. I think it's a series of revenge for Trotz.
Trotz outcoaches Reardon. That's not crazy. Hopefully the players could pick up the slack there. Alex, what about the Lightning coming off that disappointment versus the Flyers? But they did play well overall. They get another crack at the Columbus Blue Jackets. So there's an emotional component here that makes for some drama. Pretty intriguing.
Yeah, I think last year, people sometimes overstate exactly what happened last year. I think when you watch the games back, when you see what happened, Tampa outplayed them every game pretty much. But Vasilevsky was extremely poor. And if Vasilevsky's that poor again, then Columbus are going to win. If Vasilevsky's that poor again, anyone's going to beat Tampa Bay. But if he turns up and he's actually his normal self, I can't see Columbus causing too many issues. Obviously, they have some high talent players, and I love watching some of their players. I love watching Bjorkstrand. And obviously their defenseman, their young defenseman, Werenski's going to be fit and healthy, and Jones is fantastic. And as well as that, they have Nyquist, who's a fun player, and Dubois. Sean Couturier, really good friends, is a really, really fun player to watch. I think Columbus might cause them a couple of issues, especially if Hedman can't be healthy. But I would guess Tampa at worst 4-2 should win that series. So long as Vasilevsky doesn't let in goals left, right, and center, that he should be stopping like he did last year.
Yeah, I have it in 6 games myself. Chef?
Yeah, I have Tampa 4-2. I just think it's they're not going to make the same mistakes they did last year. I think I don't want to say which commentator that was talking about it on the team during the post games and all that. We're talking about how if they meet up, you put that behind you. It might have been Keith Jones talking about how the Flyers swept the Bruins. Came from behind and won against the Bruins, but then the next year it was all business. They took the Flyers light and they swept the Flyers right out. So I just think it's going to be that case. I don't think it's a sweep. I think it makes it a little bit harder for them, especially if Hedman's not there, but I still think they win 4-2.
Gotcha. And maybe the most intriguing series, Alex, is Boston playing the Canes. The Canes are really on their game right now. Didn't get a super challenge from the Rangers in terms of the Rangers' lack of depth really showed up, and not having Shesterkin at full strength and relying on a fading King Henry. So maybe that wasn't the best test, but Boston looked like they were really asleep. In fact, Bruce Cassidy, their coach, said they couldn't wait to get started. That's how disappointed he was in their round-robin showing.
I think despite regular season standings, Carolina are a deeper team than Boston. And I would back Carolina to win. I think it's going to be a very nasty series.
Yeah.
And probably 6-7 games with some injuries and awfulness going on. It's going to be a fun one to watch. Probably not so fun to play in for either team. When you look at Carolina, I do think they're underrated at times. Svechnikov has came out and is looking like a future superstar. They've got him and Aho and Teravainen together, which is just a fantastic line. And they've then got Trocheck, Niederreiter, and Necas. I think Nino Niederreiter's one of the better two-way wingers in the league. He hasn't kind of found his feet as much as I thought in Carolina, but he's still a very good player. And then you've kind of got the vet line with Williams and Stahl on together, who I think can really provide some great depth scoring at times. I think Jordan Staal is one of the most underrated players in the league just because he doesn't score as much and doesn't play power play.
Right.
And then their fourth line, they've got Martinique, who's long been a really, really good bottom six player who I liked when he was over with the Coyotes as well. I think their depth is slightly better than Boston, even though Boston do have really good depth themselves. The key for me is how healthy Dougie Hamilton is, though. We've heard he's skating and he might be ready to go in the first game. If you insert Hamilton and if Pesce can get fit as well, then that Carolina defense. I love Charlie McAvoy. I think Charlie McAvoy is one of the top 10 defensemen in the NHL. But if you've got Hamilton and Pesce and Skie and Slavin and Floria, etc. together, then that's a pretty terrifying defense.
Yeah, Brady Shea just looked great. Like he was really motivated to tell the Rangers, boy, you guys screw up. But then again, that was before the trade deadline when the Rangers thought they were just getting some assets back before not making the playoffs. So, yeah, I myself, I picked Boston to win the Cup over Vegas. So I can't retreat from that. But right now, I think I could see Carolina winning, but I do think it's going 7 games either way. Chef, a quick analysis there.
Yeah, I definitely think this goes 7 games. In fact, of all the games that are up, other than the Flyers, this is one I'm going to make sure I try to watch as much as possible. I think it's just going to be a really good series. I think they match up nicely for a first round. I think it's going to be nasty. I think it's going to be long, tough games, and I'm looking forward to every freaking minute of it. I can't wait.
Yeah, that's going to be a great one. Alex, I have the Vegas Golden Knights rolling over Chicago in 4 or 5. Anything there that you see that would make me feel differently?
I mean, I think unless Chicago can roll back time for Duncan Keith, I can't see it really going much differently. The Keith Bokvist pairing was really good in the one game I watched. And if Keith can play at that level, maybe they could have an upset, but I just can't really see it. Vegas are a really strong, deep team who play they're well drilled and know their system. And the few kind of slivers of light that Chicago showed, I'm not sure can really be replicated against such a high quality team.
No, and they're getting Vegas is getting Max Pacioretty back. I mentioned before you got on, so I think he had a quarantine or something like that because he was coming from overseas, or he might have tested positive before the bubble. I'm not really sure what the situation was, but he is back. So I also have you have Dallas and Calgary. I'm taking the Stars in 6 in this particular one. How do you see that series?
I actually thought about this. I've got a really good friend who's a Calgary fan. So I spoke about this series with him a bit. I think a lot of it depends on how the Calgary defense play. We know about Giordano and Brody and how good a pairing they are and have been for a long time. They weren't really that fantastic, really, in the play-in. But Hannafin and Anderson were brilliant, as well as the Forbert-Gustafsson pairing as well. So if Giordano and Brody can really find their game and play up to the ability level that we know they can, I think Calgary, even though they were behind them in the regular season, are a marginally better team overall. So I'm probably going to say Calgary in 6 or 7.
Okay. Obviously, the Stars are very dependent upon Ben Bishop showing up, staying healthy, and that'll be also an X factor. Chef, just quick comment about that one.
It's a game I have. Another game, 7-game series. I think it's going to be not quite as intense as Boston and Carolina, but it'll be a good one. I have Calgary at 7 because I have Calgary going to the Cup against the Flyers, so I can't.
You don't want to flame out, right?
I don't want to flame out. That's it. Flame on, baby. Flame on.
Okay. Yeah, Alex, I think the Avs just have too much for the Coyotes who aren't quite ready for prime time. And I see this being a relatively short series. I picked the Avs to roll over the Coyotes in 5 games.
Yeah, I think that could be one where it's a 4 or 5 game series. They broke up. The Avs actually coming into the round robin broke up their kind of big line. They took Landeskog, Rantanen, and McKinnon away from each other, and they put Landeskog with Kadri and Nikushkin, and put Rantanen and McKinnon with Nemesnikov at times, and really kind of rarely played the Rantanen, McKinnon, Landeskog trio, and they dominated. And then they have Burakovsky, Comfer, and Donskoi together a lot, and I think anyone who's followed me long enough knows what I think about Jonas Donskoi. I wanted the Flyers to go hard after him as a depth player. I think they just have too much. There's so much talent on that team. They're actually the team in the West that... They're not my favourite team in the West, but they're the one I enjoy watching the most in the last year or so. I love Landeskog since before he was drafted. McKinnon's obviously an unbelievable player to watch. Rantanen was a guy who I had very high on my draft board. I'm really glad Val Nikushkin has found his game again, because he's a really, really fun player to watch as well. And then they have guys like Burakovsky and Donskoi and Tyson Jost in the bottom 6. Yeah, they're extremely enjoyable to watch, and I'm going to be probably watching quite a bit of that series for as long as it lasts anyway. Yeah,
the Avalanche play with such pace, such skill. When they played Vegas, that was like a track meet, but it was a well-played game. I mean, not quite the intensity of a playoff, but you really appreciate teams that can play with that pace and skill. So that brings us to the defending champion, St. Louis Blues, taking on the upstart Vancouver Canucks. What do you think about that series? That's intriguing. That there could be an upset possibility if St. Louis is not in their game.
Yeah, and I think that upset comes down to the Canucks centers. You have 2 extremely talented young centers. Bo Horvat, who I think will probably be wanting to go all the way to the final to meet his cousin Travis Konechny, as well as Elias Pettersson. And Peterson's a fantastic player. He's unbelievable. They've got Besser and Miller, and Pettersson's kind of in his game again. There's Toffoli, Brandon Sutter in the bottom 6. They're a fun team, and kind of I enjoy watching the Canucks play. They're probably my team. They're the team, I think, in the West that if I really had to choose one to win the Cup, if it wasn't the Flyers, I would choose the Canucks. And as well, they have some underrated defensemen. I think Chris Tanev doesn't kind of get the plaudits that he deserves at times, but he's one of the best defensemen in the NHL and can move a puck as well. Quinn Hughes is so much fun to watch.
He's a marvel.
And then they've got another fun guy to watch in Troy Stecher. He hasn't quite hit the NHL in the way that some people thought he would, but I like watching him as well. And Markstrom, if he can get on top of his game, he can win them rounds. I'm going to go for a big upset, I think, actually, in the Vancouver-St. Louis series. I think Markstrom will have a good series. Peterson will come to prime time. And Vancouver will win in 6 or 7. That's the only real upset that I think I could probably predict. I mean, Carolina-Boston, I think everyone thinks that's going to be a close series. But
right, yeah.
I can see the Canucks winning. And if not this year, I think the Canucks are going to be kind of a team that are going to challenge for the next 5-6 years or so with the team that they've put together.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. Markstrom definitely is going to be the key in that particular series. I'm still taking the Blues in 6, but definitely that's going to have some great moments, I think, for Canuck fans. Chef?
Yeah, I have the Blues in 6, but I also have a note here. I think at least 2 of these games go to overtime. I think that's how entertaining that this series is going to be. It's not going to go to 7, I don't think, but I have the Blues winning it with notes of OT just because of all the points Alex made about the Canucks. I think they're just such a fun team to watch, and I have them in 6. I have it 6 games, Blues.
Great, Alex.
And I think as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think as well. One last thing on the Canucks, we saw for the entire, in the games the Canucks played, they were trying to rough up Elias Pettersson at every single venture. And he came through that test. 4 points in 4 games while playing really good two-way hockey. Probably unlucky to not get a few more points as well. I mean, a lot of that was on the power play, but he played well at even strength as well. And I think that's really the key for Vancouver. If Pettersson can put up with the abuse he's been doled out for the rest of the playoffs, then him and Horvat are just a fantastic 1-2 punch.
They are, and they will be going forward. Really going to be a fun team. Just the last one from me. Before we let you go, what is your thought about the New York Rangers getting potentially and more than likely Alexis Lafreniere winning the lottery tonight?
I mean, it's not ideal. I would have liked him to go to Minnesota or Winnipeg or Nashville in a perfect world. You know, that Rangers team has some real talent already, obviously, with Panarin, Zibanejad, Bushnevich, Capo Caco, as poorly as he played this season, and then Philip Schittel as well is a really good player. So, you know, they look like they could be dangerous down the line. I think Ryan Strome might be a bit of an illusion, though. And Lafreniere is a winger, first and foremost. I mean, he's played like 2 or 3 games at centre a couple of years ago, and it wouldn't shock me if the Rangers tried to potentially force him to play centre at some point, which would be interesting to see. It's not ideal, but it's better than the Penguins, and I think the Rangers will still be a couple of years away. I don't think Lafreniere is going to come in and be a 90-point player straight away. I think first season he'll probably hit 50, 60, and then start getting up to that top-tier player after that. But they have started to put together a really good team, and they have Adam Fox, who I'm an enormous fan of on defense. And I think if they build their defense around Adam Fox, you know, and Panarin, Zibanejad, Bushnevich, Caco, and Lafreniere going forward, could be a scary team in division. But I think the Flyers have the jump on them in terms of development right now, and I wouldn't worry about them too much, say, next year. But then the year after that, I think they could be a serious challenger in the Met.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially that Shesterkin becomes the player we think that he will become. Yeah, I could definitely see Lafreniere they could pull a Pierre-Luc Dubois like Columbus did, try him at center, and see if that can work. They wouldn't pass on him for Byfield, would they?
I mean, it's the Rangers. Never say never. They've done some hilariously crazy things in the last 20 years. I think they'll take Lafreniere. I think Byfield's a fantastic player, and any other draft, you've got probably 5 potential number 1 picks, quite frankly. But yeah, I think they'll take Lafreniere, even though there is kind of, you know, not a hole, but a slight need at centre. And I don't think Mika Zibanejad is going to have another year as good as this one. He's good, don't get me wrong, but I think he's a 75-point centre and not a guy who's going to be hitting 100 points. Even with Panarin, who I think should, quite frankly, be MVP this year.
I could see that. I'm not gonna fight you on that myself. I mean, he lifted that squad to a certain level of prominence. Without him, or even just a replacement player who was good but not Panarin, they're not the team they were. No
yep,
way.
Exactly.
No. Yeah. So, Alex, thanks so much for doing this. Where can people check you out and find you on Twitter and social? And tell us about Smart Hockey.
Yeah, well, you can always find me at AV Appleyard on Twitter. That's probably where I do reply to everyone, tweet out my thoughts in general. If you want to ask a question, anything hockey related, anything Flyers related, feel free to message me, comment. I'll pretty much always reply. I just love talking about hockey. I mean, yeah, with Smart Scouting, Josh Tesla contacted me a while back and asked me if I wanted to kind of come on board. He did a bit of work with future considerations and Dober, I believe, as well, previously. You know, and asked me if I wanted to come on board with Smart Scouting and just focus on kind of non-Flyers players, draft players. And obviously it's something I'm really interested in. I do a lot of the prospect work for The Athletic with the Flyers anyway.
Right.
So you can find Smart Scouting at SMAHT Scouting with a Boston accent on Twitter, and also smartscouting.com. Right now, obviously, we're building up kind of our prospect reports, but we have approximately 55 reports, mainly from the upcoming draft. I would say we probably have 25 of the potential first round covered already between me and Josh and Stephen Ellis as well. So yeah, check it out. There's some quite in-depth reports on a range of players. In general, the reports I'm writing are on guys that I really liked going into the year, or saw over the year. You know, quite a lot of Swedes, Finns, Germans, because they're the main games I watch, quite frankly.
Right.
And a few Europeans as well, based over in the CHL, who I liked before they went over, so I kept tabs on them. And then the odd CHL player who I kind of, you know, saw their game and thought they had really something. So most of my scout reports are guys I like. So yeah, check it out there and read all about the upcoming draft, because I think it's going to be a draft that in 10 years' time people might talk about in the same words as that fated 2003 draft, which probably set the Flyers up for the next 20 years with Richards and Carter.
Wow. So park your car and get the smart hockey. That's for sure. So
yeah, I don't know. We've got Kevin Hayes and me writing for a Boston-based scouting outfit. So Flyers going full on Boston this year, and hopefully they get the cup like the Boston Bruins did.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely try to get you back before these playoffs end and see, hopefully, because the Flyers are advancing and maybe in the conference finals or more. So, again, Alex, thank you so much. We got to do this again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to speak to you guys again. Yeah, for sure, it'd be great to speak through the playoffs as well.
All right, terrific. You take care.
Yep, you guys too. Bye.
All right. So, Chef, we are left with one other item on the docket of this playoff Lollapalooza show that we have. It's one of the longer shows. I think it's really been one of our best shows. I hope people agree with that. But before we go, we have to give you the schedule for the Flyers. They will start game one. We know they're all in Toronto, so you don't have to worry about where. And it will be at 8 p.m. Wednesday the 12th. Friday, they play game 2 at 3 p.m. Sunday, they play again at 8 p.m. And then game 4 is the Tuesday at 3. So it's basically alternating between 8 and 3 p.m. Now, games 1, 3, and 4 are, I believe, NBC Sports Philly. 1, 2, and 4. Check that. Right. And I think game 3 is a national game at 8 p.m. So whether it's on NBC Sportsnet or just regular NBC, we'll check your listings on that one.
Yeah, on Saturday night, this past Saturday night on the Tampa Bay game, it was listed on like 3 different channels on my cable system. So I won't say who. I'm not plugging anybody, but yeah, it was listed on too. So that it was because it was a national game, so it might pop up in a couple spots. But if it's a home game, if it's their home game, it will be on CSN.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out. Just check your listings, follow our account. We'll definitely keep you up to date. And with that, just remember to follow Dan Silver at dsilver88 on Twitter at dsilver88. He likes to converse back and forth with the folks. And Chef, people can find you at
Chef de Left B on Twitter.
Fantastic. I'm Isaiah at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Don't forget the underscore at Isaiah _520. And of course, follow the O&B Puckcast on your favorite platform. On Twitter, we're at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. If you could give us a 5-star rating and you could subscribe, it would be great because it moves us up the charts as people look for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And I have a feeling more people are going to be doing that than in recent memory. And with that, people, we'll be back sometime next week to tell you about some of these games. So take care.